you can take that picture down. Thank you. So as I said before, this morning is Befriender Sunday. It's the Sunday when our Befriender team, a team of lay folks specially trained to do pastoral care, lead worship. It's a Sunday when we invite all of you to consider if you would like to learn more about becoming a befriender or having a befriender. It's a Sunday when we remind ourselves about the importance of listening and being truly heard, both as spiritual practices. They are practices that allow us to live out the love of our scripture today. In the words of Jewish mystic and medical doctor Rachel Naomi Remen, listening creates a holy silence. When you listen generously to people, they can hear truth in themselves, often for the first time. And in the silence of listening, you can know yourself in everyone. Eventually, you may be able to hear in everyone and beyond everyone the unseen singing softly to itself and to you. The unseen, in the language of Dr. Remen, is another word for holiness or God. Listening generously and having space to be truly heard are especially important in times of loss. Whether we've lost somebody precious to us to COVID in this last year and a half or so or not, we have all experienced tremendous loss in this past time. We have all experienced the loss of what church historian and theorist Diana Butler Bass calls dislocation. She outlined several ways we've been dislocated out of our sense of time as it was, out of our sense of history, out of our sense of our own bodies, and out of our sense of our relationships. Here's a bit more detail. In this pandemic time, she says, we've lost our sense of time as it existed before the pandemic. How often have you thought, what day is this? What time is it? Did I miss an event? What month is it? That's temporal dislocation, as she calls it. We've lost our sense of where we are in the larger story, both of our own lives and our communal stories. History has been disrupted. Where are we? Where are we going? The growth of conspiracy theories, the intensity of social media, political and religious deconstructions, these are signs of a culture seeking a meaningful story to frame their lives because the older stories have failed. That's what she calls historical dislocation. We've lost our sense of embodiment with others and geographical location. For millions, technology has moved physicality into cyberspace, and most of us have no idea what to do with this virtual sense of location. Without our familiar sense of being bodily in specific spaces, things like gardening, baking, sewing, painting have emerged as ways of feeling the ground and the work of our hands. We've striven to maintain some sort of embodiment, even amidst its isolation. But the disconnection between our bodies, places, and other bodies has been profound. That's physical dislocation. A funny example of this from my own life is that my wife started a new job during this time of pandemic, and everybody is remote. Nobody has met each other in person, and they played a game as a breaking the ice game in one of their staff meetings lately, where they guessed each other's heights because nobody had any idea how tall each other were, because nobody has met in person. This is what it means to be physically dislocated from ourselves and each other. Physical dislocation. And finally, as I talked about last week, we've lost our daily habits of interactions with other humans, says Diana Butler Bass. Have you worried You won't know how to respond when you can be with your friends without distance, with no masks. This was written before the latest CDC guidelines. How will it feel to be in large groups again? How will work or school feel back in person with others at the next desk or waiting on customers face to face or in the first in-person meeting or in-person worship inside? What happens when the plexiglass comes down and the mask is off? This is what she calls relational dislocation. That says that the church can play a pivotal role in our late and post-pandemic lives. The church, she says, is called to, quote, the work of finding, repairing, and relocating ourselves and others with time, history, physicality, and relationships. I love those words, finding, repairing, and relocating. This is the work of our church body in this time. Listening generously and having spaces we can trust to share our stories is where this work of finding and repairing and relocating ourselves and each other begins. We have to make room to feel all of those layers of dislocation and our loss before we can relocate our bodies and spirits. The befrienders are here remotely and for some of us in person to make space for you to be heard in a way that feels safe to you. And the befrienders are looking to grow our listening team. We meet each month for an hour and a half to debrief our listening experiences and also to listen to each other. We spend regular time learning and growing our skills as listening healers. We would love to have you consider joining our team. And we'll be having one of our coffee hour breakout rooms be a space for learning more about what that would mean. But for now, I invite you to listen generously in this moment. Listen to Elly, a longtime beloved of Lyndale and a befriender, talk about her experience. You are in for a spiritual treat. Now, Elly, if you would, you are already unmuted. You may just begin.
Okay, I was a member of Plymouth Congregational Church when I started going through my divorce process and also through my process of coming out as a lesbian. They had a program called the Stephen Ministry, and that's a lay ministry. It's somewhat similar to our Befrienders program, but I found it very helpful as I went through some very difficult struggles at that time. So when I learned that Lyndale was going to start the Befrienders program, I really felt having such a program in our congregation could be very helpful, and I wanted to be part of it. Even though we're a much smaller congregation than Plymouth, I still believe having another person to talk to confidentially can really be helpful. And I know it's meant a lot to me to be part of the group of befrienders as we've learned how to be good listeners and how to interact with other folks as befrienders. One concept we covered recently in our training is a book by David Kessler on meaning as the sixth stage of grief. The final stage Kubler-Ross talks about, that you're probably familiar with, is acceptance. But Kessler feels there is another stage, that of finding meaning in ours and others' lives. And that's really made a lot of sense to me. In a podcast between Brene Brown and David Kessler, they talk a lot about the pain, loss, and grief that we have been experiencing during the pandemic. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that too. All of us have lost the world we knew in the pandemic. And we all need to hold each other's hands, at least virtually, as we go through this pain and loss and grief. We all feel the loss of normal, which consists, of course, of many losses. But if we really can't name the grief, we can't feel it. And Kessler believes that grief must be witnessed which I think is where Befrienders comes in, the witnessing of that grief. And even though all of us have experienced loss through this pandemic, we can still witness each other's grief. In fact, the witnessing is what can make it bearable and possible to work through. Each of us has our own grief, and actually for each of us, the worst loss is the one we are experiencing at the moment. But each loss is valid and legitimate and needs to be witnessed. And although Kessler emphasizes that there really may not be any meaning in the pandemic itself, that we can find meaningful moments through it all. That concept of meaningful moments really has been important to me through my struggle with cancer. I've wanted to be open about my grieving. And one thing I really grieve is not being able to do, probably not being able to do a lot of the things I had hoped to do in the rest of my life. I've lived almost 80 years, and what I've done in my life has mattered to me. So I do get the sense that there has been meaning in my life, but I'd also hope to do a lot more. My mother lived to be almost 93 years old, so I really had hoped that I would have several more years to live and do some of the things I had planned for those later years, and I know I may not be able to do those things. I don't think I'm going to be able to do all the marching and demonstrating I had hoped to do. But so far, I've been able to stand on the corner with my Grandmothers for Peace and hold up my peace sign. And I can still call the president and my legislators and give them my 2 cents worth. I can still be involved in the green team, planning and activities. And so those are the meaningful moments that I am experiencing on a daily basis. And as Kessler says, that means a great deal. I am also very grateful for this congregation. And in the one sense, all of you have been befrienders to me in one way or another. Your prayers, your talking, your visiting, bringing food, offering rides, helping me in my garden, so many other things as I continue my journey. And actually, a lot of that is above and beyond being a befriender, but it's been very, very important to me. And I appreciate all of you. You've reminded me that my life matters to you. And that means more than I could ever say. Thank you. I treasure being able to continue with you for as long as I have. And I'm reminded that, as it says in our benediction, all of us are living while dying, even as we are already resurrected. May it be so.
Amen.
Amen.
May it be so, and may we find tissues. May we also just have a moment to lift our prayer hands in blessing back towards Elly, to remind her she is not only beloved child of God, but beloved woman of this community. We adore you. We love you. You matter the world to us. Amen and our woman, because you are Elly. Here ends our sermon time. Let us